Yes. So with that, would you stand to your feet and welcome our dear friend, Dr. Jeffrey Seif. Come on, Jeff. Come on, let's give him a good First Friday welcome. Oh, yeah. You got 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Really is a thrill to be here with you this evening with my wife, Barry. Would you stand up, sweetheart? Barry Kay, in from the great state of Texas, and we were both shocked when my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, will you guys stand up, drove hours to be here to surprise us. We're all really happy to be here. What I want to do this evening is reflect with you on a number of things that have been forgotten through time and circumstance. Someone said, oh, I remember you were here before. What are you going to teach us new? And I said, well, I'm not really going to do anything new. I want to get into some things that have been forgotten. You'll see where I'm going with this as I develop it. I don't want to play my hand at the front end. A lot of preachers, here's the title of the message, the introduction, and 3 points, and then you get at it, and everybody knows where you're going before you start. And I don't want to do that, but I'm interested in stuff that's been forgotten. At the front end, I'd like you just to muse with me for a second. I wonder to what extent, sitting in the room, you can recall what the favorite song was, your father's favorite song. Maybe his favorite meal, his favorite restaurant, his favorite job. I raise those questions rhetorically, not to make you potentially feel bad for not knowing what your father was all about, as much as I wanted to underscore how so much is lost from generation to generation. There's a Hebrew expression, dor lador, from generation to generation. And as much as we purport to know, there's just so much that we don't know. There's so much that's lost to us. And I mention that at the outset because I would think that you're like me in the sense that a reason why you're here is because you've cultivated an appreciation for something that's been forgotten. Through time and circumstance, women and men, well-intended women and men, have lost sight of the Jewish roots of the Christian faith. Rabbi Paul, who's an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, became Saint Paul. You know, Miriam, who was an adolescent teenage Jewish girl who was shocked, becomes the Virgin Mary, Queen of Heaven. And I'm not trying to disrespect any religious tradition as much as to say that before there ever were Christian religious traditions, there was a Jewish story. Jesus, his name was Yeshua. He wasn't born in Bethlehem, he was born in Bethlehem. Matthew's name wasn't Matthew, it was Matachahu. Through time and circumstance, so much has been lost, and we're living in a days of Elijah kind of day where there's this recovery, this discovery, this taking a new look at the old book and wanting to explore the Jesus story, perhaps as it might have looked in century 1. In that interest of exploration, what I want to do this evening is begin my default position when asked to speak somewhere. If someone doesn't assign me a title, my default position is to always go to the Torah portion of the week. Jews the world over this week are looking at Parashat Yitro. It's from the book Shemot, from Exodus, chapter 18 through 20. My default position is to go there and rummage around in the text and just see if the Lord's speaking to me from that, and then take that as the launch point. And against that backdrop, what I want to do is just look at the bookends of this week's Torah reading in the Jewish world and just look at a few words. I'm interested in chapter 19, Shemot, Exodus, chapter 19, verse 5, where he says, if you keep my voice and covenant, then you will be to me a treasure. V'hitem li segula. Let me hear you say segula. He says, you will be to me a treasure. I want to reflect some with you on that treasure, that sense of treasure and lost treasure. In part, I want to do it because I think a lot of us walk around shredded with self-esteem issues and, I'm too ugly, I'm too fat, I'm not this, I'm not that, and people are just constantly bombarded with an ego-dystonic inner dialogue that kind of shreds. And even church folk, people that believe in the Lord, can themselves lose some sense that they, in fact, are a treasure. I want the word segula. Let me hear you say segula. I want segula to be in your mind. Also, if you'll look, please, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 24. Now we're getting to the end of the reading. He says, B'kol hamakom, in every place, asher azkir, where I cause honor, et shmi, where in every place where I cause my name to be honored. He says, avo eleka uvarechachtika. He says, in every place I cause my name to be honored. Avo, I will come eleka to you, and I will bless you. People forget. I want to not only look at, I not only want those in the front of your thinking as we begin this evening, but similarly, I want to go to the Matthean Gospel, chapter 5. His name is Matachahu, commonly referred to as Matthew. There's a verse in the 13th verse of the 5th chapter. You are the salt of the earth. Hablas. Let me say hablas. Salt in Greek. It's from an ancient word, purified, seasoned, and preserved. Something very, very special. I think through time and circumstances, Bible people, whether they're getting their cues from the Older Testament or the Newer Testament, they lose sight of who we are and where we come from. And I want to mention this on the front end to just raise a number of questions with you. Here we are in Jacksonville, Florida. Where does the word Florida come from? It's from flora. Are you familiar with flora and fauna? The word Florida comes from the word flowering, the land as it was perceived at the frontier. Where does Jacksonville come from? Okay, Andrew Jackson. Why does he figure in here? Because Jackson was the first governor, the first military governor of this state. Now, when we came in on the airplane today, there is right by the airport, close to the airport, a city, Yulee. Who's ever heard of Yulee before? Okay. Where does Yulee come from? Yulee, just north of the airport, was named after David Levi Yulee, the son of a man, Moses Elias Levi, named after a Jew. David Levy Yulee, of whom Yulee is named after, was the first Jewish senator in the United States. He, the son of Moses Levy, was one of two brothers. Moses Levy, I want to talk to you about him briefly to mention his other brother. Well, just to say his other brother went up and became a physician at Harvard University. Yulee, whom the city is named after here, is named after David Levy Yulee. And David Yulee was descended from a fellow named Moses Levy. I don't know if you realize this, but when we're at World War I, 40% of the Jews in the state of Florida lived in Jacksonville. The oldest Jewish institution in the state is a cemetery here in Jacksonville. Not only that, David Yulee's father, Moses Levy, 80 years before the founding of the state of Israel, he purchased 50,000 acres here and started what he called the pilgrimage plantation for persecuted Jews from all over the world to come. It was the first kibbutz in the world where they labored and they worked together. He was the founder of that. Not only did he found that, he founded it. He came from Morocco. He acquired a fortune in trade, but didn't just want to be rich. He wanted to give something back. And in the wake of the Napoleonic Wars, where anti-Semitism was rife in Europe, he wanted to do something, and he purchased 50,000 acres here, right after Florida was ceded from the Spanish. Right here, he purchased 50,000 acres to provide a refuge. 80 miles from here, there's a town called Mechanipe. Who's ever heard of Mechanipe before? Am I saying it wrong? Okay, my bad on that. I'm just a damn Yankee, you know. I'm playing like I know Southern history. Now, Moses Levy was the founder of that city. And not only was he the founder of that city, that was the first distinct U.S. town in Florida after it was ceded, after this land mass was ceded from the Spanish. Sorry for mispronouncing it. I looked it up. It's 81.5 miles from here. There's a lot of history around here. And you haven't heard nothing yet. I haven't even given you the interesting stuff. There's a lot of history, but unfortunately, things are just lost from generation to generation. You know, Paul likes to sing, these are the days of Elijah, a kind of renewal, a kind of restoration. And guys like me and he and we were all about a kind of recovery and a representation of something that's lost. Something that's lost. Now, for me as a biblical theologian, the Jewish roots of the Christian faith is lost. I'm all about recovering that. But what I want to recover specifically this evening with you is something that derives from the text where the Lord says to Bnei Yisrael, to the sons of Israel, you are a treasure. And he says that where my name is retold and respected, I will come to you and I will bless you. That's not only true for the Jews, that's true for yous, because those through the newer covenant are invited to be salt of the earth, a city set on a hill. There's something very special there. But I'm interested in a promise where he says to a people, you are going to be a treasure. Now, people are cognizant, if you look at Nobel Prizes, a lot of this stuff's doled out to Jews, innovations in science, art, industry, it's ubiquitous. You can look at the nation state of Israel, the gross national product, what's produced there in a world racked by political intrigue, social unrest, ubiquitous war, where everyone goes to work on one hand and has to go into the army on the other. Even in that world, if you look at the gross national product, what's produced in little Israel, no bigger than the state of New Jersey, is more than what's produced in the 22 Arab nation states round about it combined. So there's a kind of value, there's something like a green thumb. I want to talk to you about where Jews came from, how they got here, and how they have been something of a treasure in the being here, thus fulfilling, if you will, the promise that you're to be a treasure. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in 1492, it wasn't just Columbus who sailed the ocean blue. All the Jews were expelled from Spain. Some went to Portugal, others North Africa, further back into the Ottoman Empire, over to Turkey. And those that could got out of Dodge and found ways to come to the New World. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel's father, a famous professor in Israel, believed that in Central America and South America and in the Caribbean, there are some 30 million Hispanic people that have Jewish roots and they don't know it. It's lost history. Lost history. There's a couple books I want to recommend, not that I'm looking to sell them, but I want to recover some of that history in general and look at some fascinating things in particular and then close with a personal application. One of the books was written by the state historian of New Mexico. His name is Stanley Hordes, who did his PhD, his doctoral dissertation at Tulane University. And he charts in his book, To the Ends of the Earth. It's called To the End of the Earth, A History of the Crypto-Jews. He looks at the story, works with the primary sources, Jews that escaped and went into Central America and South America. I was just 3 weeks ago with my wife Barry in San Antonio, gave a lecture on Jews making their way to Central America, Mexico City, and then Lima, and then from Mexico City up into the northern sphere and what we call North America today, out of Central America. The story of Jews, crypto-Jews, having to be Jews in secret, running from the Inquisition that was looking to stamp them out, individuals trying to get away from the old world on the Iberian Peninsula. First left Spain, some went to Portugal, but then they were kicked out of Portugal as well. And this whole world here was awash in Jews making their way to the New World. Case in point, Cuba. There's an argument that the word Havana itself etymologically comes from a word meaning the tribe. Every piece of research that I've looked at quotes a particular bishop who's expressing chagrin in his correspondences because Havana was teeming with Sephardic Jews escaping and coming over to the New World. They set up legislation to try and keep them out, but they came in, they got in, and the Inquisition came over here finally to try and root them out and kill them and get rid of them. There was one place where the Inquisition didn't have jurisdiction. Part of the terms of endearment when Colon, whose name is Columbus, when he secured not only the boats and the financing to come over here to the New World, but he secured as well hereditary rights to the new kingdom that he discovered. That was withheld to him elsewhere, but the crown gave him an island, Jamaica. Jamaica itself became a haven for Jews coming over to the New World. Not only Jamaica, and I want to talk about Jamaica because I want to talk about what launched from Jamaica, lost history. But all the islands in the Caribbean have Jewish cemeteries. If you look at Jamaica, some 20% were Jews of Kingston. If you look at Jamaica, of particular interest, when you look at the tombstones written in Hebrew, you find 50 examples of tombstones written in Hebrew that have a skull and a crossbone on it. I want to talk to you about the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean and get a little closer to home to history here. Now, when we think of piracy today, and I'll even get into this a little bit, that, you know, there's Jack Black, the Pirates of the Caribbean. Jack Black is a figure that was made popular in media, a play off of Jean Lafitte was his name, a famous pirate who I'll get into. Jean Lafitte was Jewish. John and his brother Pierre. Now, to speak of Jewish pirates, on the one hand, to even talk like that, it can play into, yeah, those Jews always after the money, those bad, wicked people. If you can understand for a minute, however, that you're looking at people that were you were looking at people that were kicked out of their homeland. They lost fortune, they lost everything, owing to the imperial crown. And when they came over here to the New World, these were mariners. Oh, by the way, I should say, when America declared its independence, America had one vessel that was commandeered by John Paul Jones. You can recall the story. All the other ships in the Navy were commandeered by Jews with names like Shield of Abraham, the Prophet Samuel, Queen Esther. Fascinating, you can't make this stuff up. What happened is the Jewish pirates from the Caribbean came to aid. Now, to speak of piracy, on the one hand, it sounds nefarious and inherently evil, those pirates. No, that from their perspective, they're at war. And there's different kinds of pirates. Some had what's called a letter of marque, which means that they are working for a particular government. They're subcontracted to work for a certain government, to be a navy. And then what happens is when they board and take other vessels, enemy vessels, they share the loot with the country that contracts them. It's the difference between, by the way, a buccaneer and what they called a privateer. Privateers were contracted. I remember I was with Paul. He'd do the music, and I'd be invited to teach all over the country. One place in Vineland, New Jersey. There's a story there where the American revolutionaries had their first win against Hessians close by. These were German subcontracted soldiers. Back in the day, people would pay mercenaries, and America had no navy. But Jews that came over here to the New World, in fact, when they came over to the New World, the only reason why they got here is because Jewish scholarship wasn't confined by Catholic dogma. The Catholics taught that the world was flat. That meant nothing to Jews, who had their own astronomy. If you look at the nautical maps, the astronomy, the sciences, it's all Semitic. And they didn't care, that they knew, and all these explorers, Vasco da Gama and others, they hired Jewish pilots, navigators, and all their maps were drawn up by Jews. They knew the seas, the lanes, the winds, the currents, the stars, how to navigate and get around. And not only that, with that, they knew when vessels were coming, what was ideal. And they situated themselves over the horizon and waited for the imperial fleet to come. Jamaica was a pirate's haven for the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean. What happened, however, is the island of Jamaica, which was in the Colon family hands, eventually came into English hands. And the English Navy, subsequent to suffering losses in the Revolutionary War, not long after, went and they galvanized their forces around Jamaica, preparing for an assault of America. It's the battle for New Orleans was arguably the most decisive battle in American history. It was with that victory that America then comfortably held the port and thus the Mississippi River, and with that in control, then it opened up all the westward expansion. The British came, and the British wanted to invade New Orleans. And they're there in Jamaica, and they learned that there was one fellow who lived in New Orleans, who worked there, who ostensibly had a shop there for his enterprises, who knew all the waterways, the bayou. I mean, if you're bringing a navy into New Orleans, you don't want your ship to be grounded. You're nervous about that. You want your boats to be afloat, and there's all these waterways. It's precarious, the depths, the width, how to maneuver all that. There was one person that they sent spies to this guy, Jean Lafitte, whom I mentioned earlier. What Jean Lafitte did is the British petitioned him to be their spies. What he does is he goes to a certain general and he shows them the letters, and he gives away to that general, whose name was Jackson, who was the military governor of Florida, who became the 7th president of the United States later. He gives them the strategy. What happens is when the British invade, the casualties, the Americans are set up so well, they're so prepared, and the English are so lost. It's like, I think the English lost 2,000. Whereas there's a debate whether the Americans lost, was it 6 or 13? I mean, it was just decisive, and it gave rush to this concept of manifest destiny. God is with us. He has a plan. It spirited all this momentum westward because of a Jewish pirate, a privateer. What happens is Jackson rewarded him and honored him, and in Galveston, Texas, that he became a governor there finally and fully, where he ended his days. To me, I brought all this up to say, when God says, these people, the Jews, there's a call on them, there's something special, there's something there. When he said it, to me it's interesting the way it lives out in history, lost history. And when I began the telling of it, I didn't want to just, extol the virtues and the blessings of being Jewish. For those of you that aren't Jewish, I wanted to extol the blessings of being Jewish. That is to say, that those of us who name the Lord similarly have this. You are the salt of the earth. By the way, do you know they used to coin salt? Salt was in coins. It was minted. It wasn't just table salt. I mean, it was very, very valuable, an extremely valuable commodity. When he says you are the salt of the earth, they're hearkening to something valuable, where people can get utility out of it, not just because of its purchasing power, but its preserving power in others. This, to me, this sense of we are the salt of the earth is underscored in this day and age right now just by the way evangelicals rallied, and by virtue of so doing, there's actually some hope that this country might even turn around. My God, it's people with evangelical dispositions that rose up, that stood up. And, we deplorables, we local yokos, stood up, and over and against the chagrin of the elite media, wanted to make our voices known. And it's an example, by the way, where God's people really can and do make a difference. I'd like to, as I bring this to a close, There's an old saying, I love a finished speaker, I really truly do. I don't mean one who's polished, I just mean one who's through. Enough already. And as I put a wrap on this, I'd like the worship team to come, however we're going to do this. I'm going to give this to Paul in a minute, and I want to have some tender time with the Lord. It may be that there's someone within the sound of my voice that forgot what treasure you really are. The kind of specialness that's uniquely invested in you. And you may have just spent a long time hearing a whole lot of voices. And I want you to hear this one. That, and it could be that you want to join the special army, that you've been living your life kind of away from the Lord. Speaking of forgetfulness, it's when we took the bread and the cup, do this in remembrance of me. The expression, eat this is my body in Latin, hucus corpus. It's where you get the word hocus pocus. Oh, that's a bunch of nonsense. And it may be that in your own life and circumstances, you got to a place in your life where you thought, oh, this religious stuff is just some nonsense. And I want to beg you this evening to reconsider. Whether you get the book To the Ends of the Earth, I don't make a dime on it. We're not selling it out there. And the book, The Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean. Great title. Available. When in doubt, Google. You can find them. Whether you get those books, I don't care. I want you to get the gist of this book right here. And, if you're, away from the Lord, I want you to come and be that treasure. If you're walking with that Lord, I want to encourage you to participate in being that light. And that's what I understood that challenge was, by the way, with Paul, with, in this world that's so racked by decay, despair, racism, and so forth, to see young, enthusiastic Jews that have come to know the Lord, Arabs come to know the Lord, getting together and lifting up God's voice from Jerusalem. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a message. Shalom from Jerusalem. And I want to invite you to join the army this evening. So to join the army, to join the kingdom, to just recover that treasure that we are. Thank you for affording me the opportunity to share with you for this half hour. To me, it's less about the personality of Jeffrey Seif. That testimony was there. I wasn't expecting it here this evening. I knew that Paul put it out on his website, or Nathan put it out. I knew it was put out. It's not really important to me that you remember me, that you appreciate me. What's important to me is that you grab a hold of what God has for you, that you blow off that despair, decay, disorientation, that you grab hold of the treasure that he put in you, and you rediscover the treasure that is you. And I want to thank you. My wife wants to thank you. We want to thank you. The Wilburs want to thank you for wanting to participate with us in resurrecting and remembering the Jewish roots of the Jesus story. God bless you. Thank you, Paul.
Yes. And you're a treasure. We are very grateful tonight. I love that word. Give me that again, the Hebrew treasure. Segula. Segula. That's one that escaped me. I don't know that one. Segula. Turn to someone next to you and tell them, you're a segula. One of the purposes in our hearts for opening these doors every month is to bring a treasure into our city. And it's happened for years. Chuck Pierce, Jeffrey Seif, Asher Intrader, voices that God has put his finger on. And it's our delight to share these treasures with you. Did you know, Dr. Seif, that Jacksonville is the city where the first hymns were sung on the North American continent? 17.6 miles from right where we stand. I made that up. Because you have now so thoroughly embarrassed my understanding of where I live. Now, he's from Texas. Do you know what Texas means? Or how about the word Dallas? Do you? You do know? Oh. That's a professor's way of saying, I have no idea. As I have no idea, I just was trying to get some points here somewhere. Before we dismiss tonight, I would like to just share a verse with you. I discovered it while asking the Lord for songs for the new project in Jerusalem. And I think just quite by divine direction, he took me over to Zechariah chapter 9. And don't bother looking at it now. The whole chapter is worthy of a professorial dissecting. But he says this: return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope. He's talking about a regathering. He's talking about prophetically what he's going to do in the last days to fulfill his promises to his friend Avram, later called Abraham. Indeed, I believe that tonight we're here because he is still fulfilling his promises to his friend Abraham. You heard it several times from Dr. Seif, quoting from Bereshit, beginnings, Genesis chapter 12. He said to Avram, through you, all the families, say all the families of the earth will be blessed. He's still fulfilling his promise to his friend. There's a modern psalmist who's gained quite a bit of notoriety over the last decade or maybe 15 years, who wrote a song, I am a friend of God. He calls me friend. You might have difficulty saying those words with real faith tonight. But if your life is hidden with this Messiah, in him, you are his friend. And what he says, he will fulfill. And speaking through the prophet Zechariah many years ago, he said, "Return to this fortress, you prisoners of hope." And as I spent a few moments on that thought, I remembered that the name of the Lord is a fortress, a strong tower of safety. And the scriptures tell us that those who run into him are safe or saved or restored or protected, covered, renewed, provided. And I'm just impressed tonight that he's saying to some of us in here, return to my name. Return to the fortress of my name, of the re-embracing of this covenant. I'm a strong tower of safety. Come in and be my friend, and I'll fulfill my word to you. And then we become that salt, that light, that extends the same grace wherever we go. We shift the atmosphere. We change the conversation. We redirect the focus from the problem to the problem solver. I want to invite you tonight. He may be speaking directly into your heart. And I'd like to give you an opportunity. Would you bow your heads with me for just a moment? We're going to have a Baptist moment here for just a second. If you'll bow your head and just close your eyes, because I'd like to give a couple of people who I know God is speaking to the dignity of a quiet moment, just the two of you. And you might be saying, Lord, I need to return to the safety of your name. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the door is open wide. We sang it tonight. In your presence, it's where I belong. And he's inviting you to run back to his presence tonight. Because you are a prisoner of that hope that he loves you. You are a prisoner of that hope that what he said he will do. And he's saying right now, just make a decision. And run back to the safety of my name. I'm a fortress. Because you are my prisoner of hope. And that hope will not be deferred. I'll fill it full. And that hope will turn to faith. And that faith will produce the substance of what you've hoped for. If you'd say, Paul, I know he's speaking to me right now. Just lift your hand and tell the Lord, I'm responding now. Here I come. Go ahead. Just lift your hand. Just you and him. I'm not going to ask you to stand. I'm not going to ask you to come forward. I'm not going to sing a song over you. I want you to have an opportunity to say, Lord, I hear it. I hear your voice. And I'm running to the safety of your name. Because there's a name above every other. the strong tower, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus our Messiah. There's no other name given to men under heaven by which we might be safe, saved, whole, restored. I saw a few hands. Anyone else? Just you and him. Lord, here I am. I'm running to the safety of your name right now. Lord, I thank you tonight for your word. Thank you that it's eternal. Thank you that it accomplishes what you sent it to do. I'd like to dismiss you with this ancient blessing, thousands of years old, also found in the Torah, kept and protected by those pesky Jewish people. In Numbers chapter 6, the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, and he said, when you speak over my people, declare these words. He said, when you do, I will do two things. Please hear these two things that he promised he would do. He said, I will place my name on them. Run to the safety of my name, you prisoners of hope. He said, I will place my name on them, and I, Jehovah, will bless them. Would you stand tonight with me and just place your hands in a position of receiving? Because I believe that this God who blesses is about to deposit some things in your life. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panev elecha v'choneka. Yisai Adonai, Yisai Adonai, panav elecha, ve'asem lecha shalom. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. In the name of Yeshua, Jesus, our Messiah, who is the Prince of all peace, the King of all kings, whose name is a strong and mighty fortress. Run to the fortress, you prisoners of hope. Amen. Amen. Can we give the Lord some thanks tonight? Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. All right, I warned you earlier, we are going to rush away. I've already spoken more than I was supposed to. I was rebuked formally from the platform. We do have some wonderful refreshments for you. Hang out, meet some folks, enjoy, and have a great Shabbat. We'll see you next month, March 2nd, right back here. Shabbat Shalom.